Hello Guardians, it is Ebontis here, and I wanted to go over Director's Cut Part 1. So this is Luke Smith's kind of state of the game for Destiny 2 that he's releasing in 3 parts. Today is Tuesday, August 13th. He released this earlier. I did a full Twitch read and kind of live reactions, but that one ended up being about 54 minutes. I will upload that to the podcast platform that we do. So if you're audio podcast, so Spotify, Google Play, if you go to the Last Word podcast, I'll do this as a couple bonus episodes, because I'm pretty much going to do that with each part. I'm going to be on Twitch. I'll read it live, stop and pause for any reactions, and those will be a little longer. As I said, that one was like 54 minutes, so I will put those up separately on the audio platform so you guys can catch those if you want to. But what I want to do today for the YouTube audience is give you guys more of a summarized feel of what is going on and just kind of my general thoughts on each one of these pieces. May not be the shortest thing, and this will definitely be a talking head video, so if you want to just minimize it, listen in the background, that will be more of what this is. But just remember, tomorrow, Wednesday, August 14th, at 12 o'clock noon Central Time, at least, I will be at work, but that is when the Armor 2.0 stream goes live. So I will be home at about 2-ish, so somewhere 2:30, kind of once I get settled and have some food. I'm going to actually go back and go on Bungie's Twitch, and I'm going to watch and see what they talk about. And I'm going to do my live reactions to that, because that's one of the biggest things I'm excited about. And some of the things they've learned are going to be addressed, but we don't know that until, we see what comes next. So that will be tomorrow. Catch me live on twitch.tv/Ebontis, 2:30. If you guys are watching this later, that was August 14th, but you guys can always check that one out. So the big thing for part 1 that Luke Smith wanted to talk about is he wanted to go back and look back at about the past 6 months. He's going to have 3 pieces to it. He's going to be talking about supers and PvP and armor and stuff like that, and those kind of fit a bit more for as they are going to be revealing changes that are going to be going forward. Those are going to be probably after they talk about Armor 2.0 and kind of a little bit more is going to be revealed. So today is looking back at the past. And they actually spent a lot of time in this looking back at the kind of the past 6 months. So you've had Season of the Drifter, kind of the end of the Armory, and then also Season of Opulence. A lot of it is focused around what they learned from Season of the Drifter, because as many people know, there were issues that they had with that. Some of it was dislike, some of it was too focused, some was reckoning. So we're going to go through and kind of touch on these pieces. They kind of do jump around a little bit, but I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as I can. Again, this will be a talking head, so feel free to minimize at any point. But they basically start, he says, they wanted to have more communication, and he wanted to put this together. It is a giant wall of text, so if this is not your thing, that's kind of why I'm doing this one for you. If you want to catch the audio version, the actual verbatim audio version, again, on our podcast platform. But one quick line, he says, "We're making a lot of changes to Destiny 2 with Shadowkeep and New Light. We want Destiny 2 to be an amazing action MMO in a single evolving world that you can play anytime, anywhere with your friends." And that's one thing he references. I'm going to keep referencing that all the time until it's true, and then I'm going to keep referencing it until it's good enough. So that is their goal. They want this to continue. This is their baby. They want this to be as best as it can be. And this past year has been quite a journey. They're now an independent studio, so the buck stops with them, so they want to do it right, at least in their eyes. And even sometimes in their eyes doesn't quite pass muster, and, they acknowledge that down below as well. But the big thing is they are trying to make some pretty sizable changes, it is seeming like. So I'm honestly very curious as to how Shadowkeep is going to look in comparison to the game we have right now. First thing they talk about is the last 6 months, looking back. They set up a calendar of content, they showed it to you early, and they delivered. But unfortunately, as that season after season after season of content has been quite a task for them to accomplish, it is something their team has kind of been a little worn out. They had 3 different seasons, different themes to those, and they kind of want to, basically, they need a more systematic, this is kind of the last line, systematic standardized set of mechanics for progression to keep our teams healthier. The main reason that you take the teams kind of getting worn out, the last line here specifically says Black Armor had its bounties, because you had your different weapons that you'd go through. Season of the Drifter had the Reckoning Machine, so you had the motes and the armor and then the loop back and forth between the 2 modes, which was a pretty big undertaking. And Season of Opulence has the Chalice. So you've got the Menagerie, you go in there, or Menagerie, depending on how you say it. But you've got that in there. Those are 3 completely different mechanics that they've added to the game in months that are different systems, but they're all progression related, building towards, your character. they've learned something from each of these, but the idea is the cycle has been something they do not want to maintain, and they want to make something maybe a little more uniform in progression, which honestly for me sounds like it could be a good thing if just generally playing the game helps you level up as opposed to having to go to specific places. So as it's something for them, as I respect the team at Bungie not wanting to kill their employees, I'm very curious how they find the balance of giving us, different content to play, but not always giving us like 16 different ways of progression. So I'm kind of curious about that one. And that leads into the next one. He says powerful sources are a problem. As the game's weekly sources of power drew, Destiny sits at times, it could feel like a chore because you've got Dreaming City, you've got your weekly bounties, you've got your daily bounties, you've got your weekly challenges, you've got your daily challenges, strikes, story missions, Nightfalls, 100,000 Nightfall, Gambit, Gambit Prime, Reckoning could be a thing. You've got the Menagerie, you've got Crucible, you've got Comp, you've got, lost sectors and public events and bounties and stuff to do. There's a lot of things in this game, without a question. So when it comes to redoing the same content, and I think that was kind of brought to a head pretty well when it came to Season of Opulence, is he kind of summarizes it perfectly well. Each season brought with new powerful sources and optimizing your character meant that maybe you were still running 3 story missions every week or returning to the Dreaming City months after those first few magical trips from last fall. Basically, we know when we want to level up our character for a new season to go from 700 to 750 or 650 to 700, every time we make that leap in power level, we have to go back and do all those powerful grind sources. So they're honestly looking at ways where they could, weight some of the newer content to be better or decrease some of the older content so it doesn't have as much meaning. So playing more of the newer content is going to be more beneficial. People will still find the best way to make use of the content, but if they're going to really steer us towards newer content or maybe just honestly let us play things and make progression that way, I'm curious to see how that comes out. Season of the Drifter is broken into multiple parts. Thoughts part 1 is Gambit in itself, and please let me know in the comments below what you guys think. I see different people have different opinions. My brother and I, me, Lord Cognito, Stone, lots of people I talk to have different opinions on this one, so this is what I want to hear in the comments below. Do you prefer Gambit or Gambit Prime? They basically state which Gambit is going to be the Highlander of Gambits. There can be only one. Now, there could be a hybrid between the two, which is also a possibility. Maybe it is just one round, but maybe the boss fight is not quite the 3-in-1 invasions or less. However they want to balance them. Basically, you've got 2 modes, and as they can't just keep adding and tacking on little bubbles onto the director and, splintering their player base, at some point they may, consolidate that into one piece of Gambit. And I'm honestly curious. Let me know in your thoughts below because they're thinking about it. They're open to your opinions. So let me know. And of course, you never know if they read the comments too. For me, I'm kind of torn. I like a little bit of both. So I'm really curious what you guys think. As we get more through this, I'll kind of talk about my thoughts. Part 2, Reckoning. Now, Season of the Drifter Reckoning really had it had a lot of things wrong with it. Many people would give you different varieties of what's wrong. Whether, the first one is just, you're killing enemies and the percentage goes up and you're not really clear. It's just like kill enemies and it's over and cool. Okay. Not really anything too crazy. And then as soon as the bridge gets involved on wave 2 or wave 3, the bridge is absolutely bananas. It is crazy town. And he starts this whole thing out, and this is where it's going to come to where your feeling powerful may get adjusted in kind of a balanced way. He said the first time, and this starts this whole thing. First time I used Phoenix Protocol at home, I knew it was over. I had an exotic coat that refills my Well of Radiance and then refills itself as I slay. So that I can continue to place my Well of, quote, stand here to be borderline invulnerable and deal tons of damage. It's true. Well of Radiance right now is one of those things that basically is your most efficient thing to have in a PvE encounter. If you're going to go after bosses, stand in Well of Radiance. You're really hard to kill and you can dump out a ton of damage. If you have an opportunity to stand still, it's going to be one of the most efficient things. And to sum up this kind of wall of text, they basically said they designed Reckoning with Phoenix Protocol and Well of Radiance in mind. And that ended up being a problem. You have one exotic, and even not specifically the exotic, but you have one super that is making you so powerful that you have to basically smash the player from all these different directions. When they make encounter guidelines, they typically try to design them as follows. Quick run through. Try not to spawn enemies behind the player. Try and make players, take space from enemies. So you take a room and you got enemies on the left, right, and center. You run in, you kill the enemies on the right. Now you've taken space from that right side of the room. That's yours now. Now you can fight from there. I think that's what that means. We want players to have cover where their shields and health can recharge, or where they need to get smart using geometry. We want players to be able to understand where in the space the enemies will come from. They use, spawn clouds, drop ships, audio cues, things like that. As character power was dramatically increasing, the encounter rules got thrown out the window. That's the final one. All those bullet points above it got chunked. And unfortunately, that sucks, because you have really good encounters that are made by this team at Bungie, and for them to combat an exotic and a class that they made, they now have to build something so ridiculous with Thrall coming at you constantly, giant bosses that spawn on either side of you that will smash or set you on fire, and on top of that, you have snipers coming from either side. I mean, my issues with Reckoning were a lot, but it usually always seemed to be with the bridge. When you finally got to the end on the encounter, both end encounters for 3 were okay, just in their different variety. The bridge was just brutal. If you tried to do that with a random team, say I went in with hammers, somebody had chaos reach, and say nobody had tether or well of radiance, you were kind of hosed. But if you have well of radiance and tether, it's easy. It's really not that bad. So they have these supers in the game right now that are at the level of almost breaking something, and that will lead into something else. So it's just kind of one of those things. They do mention, by the way, actually I'm not there yet. Hold that thought. Part 3, let's talk about difficulty and touch on sandbox nerfs. So I know many of you guys know about Whisper of the Worm getting nerfed. It was a thing. For me, kind of hurt, because that's like one of my best videos, and you guys love that guide, and now it's less useful. Some people still use it, of course, but it's still a cool gun. Just doesn't have the weight that it did. It can't be an infinite ammo thing. And that's one of those, anybody who looks at that honestly can say, Whisper of the Worm, having infinite ammo, it's likely to break something. But for them, you also have to remember when that was actually introduced was towards the end of year 1, when our Guardians felt at our weakest, and they were trying to give us something powerful. The biggest thing the Guardians of Destiny need to figure out is that it's not always going to be the same. You're not going to hold on to the same gun for 7 years and be able to use this one thing. You're going to have to ebb and flow with the changes and sandboxes and patches and updates as they continue to make this game. And this is an important thing. They talked about Halo when they had people come play it, and they said they wanted them to play it on heroic difficulty because it's challenging. And when people beat a challenging encounter, it feels really good. The only difference is, challenge is different to everybody. And in an action game, it's, everybody's going to be different. Me doing a solo flawless Nightfall versus somebody doing, strikes in a playlist and feeling like they didn't die. It's like, you've got everybody on every different level in here. I'm going to go get worked over in competitive PvP, but I do okay in quick play, and I'm kind of like okay. But still, challenging in a game is something that makes it fun. Otherwise, kind of what's the point? And challenges are going to be different for different people. You can play something like SimCity or City Skylines or Satisfactory, where you're building and maintaining and trying to understand these systems that are working. That's a challenge in itself to do it successfully, because you can be really inefficient or not, and succeed or not. Take something like Dark Souls and Sekiro. Those are challenging, figuring out boss encounters and timing and how are you going to work your movement and maneuvers and things like that. And then you take a challenge in Destiny that has so many different things into it, and they said campaigns, they've typically made them pretty easy. As people get into post-game, they look for more challenges. But across Destiny's history, we haven't had enough challenge deep into the end game. And they're working on that, but they are trying to also balance another thing. They have RPG components to this game. And the RPG components of customization and things like that are things that can weigh against the action side of the game. So when you get into the action side of things, you've got shooting and movement and double jumps and supers. And you've got the RPG where you're like, hey, am I tankier, or do I move faster, or do I recover my health more, or do I get my super back faster, and stats and all those things. And they're really trying to walk a delicate line between both of those, which is never going to be an easy thing to do for both of those. But generally, they've tried to manage it as good as possible, and it's something they will honestly just continue to have to work on. There's a little more in this section. It's a long one, though, so I don't want to spend too much time on it because I've already been talking for a minute. But I did want to say one thing. This is where it was. There are more changes coming in Shadowkeep. Buffs to things like scout rifles. It's coming. We'll see how much, but scout rifle buffs are coming. Nerfs to mechanics that circumvent the ammo economy. What circumvents the ammo economy? Or reload speed, which is another thing, because then when they talk about reloads, they're like, you know, having to reload is part of the animation and the gun mechanics. But if you can stand behind a rally barricade, Lunafaction's Well of Radiance, stuff like that, definitely breaks that a little bit. And then refactoring the way damage stacking works. So if you stand in Well of Radiance and one person goes over and fires a tractor cannon on Galaron in Crown of Sorrows, and then everybody dumps void grenades on there, that's a butt ton of damage because it all stacks. Because he's debuffed to void damage, you're in Well of Radiance, you're doing more void damage, and he's weak to void, and it stacks. At some point, not everything can stack, and apparently that's something they're working on. Next, we get to the Pursuits tray. This is huge. And honestly, this is one of those, they knew it as soon as it happened. Unfortunately for them, it's because they thought it was okay. Whoever had tested it, somebody had an idea. But generally by the community, the new Pursuits tab has not been enjoyed. But the main reason is it wasn't finished, basically, when we got it. They kind of say it pretty clearly here. I was trying not to throw it too hard, but it felt like we started to redecorate your house, but we didn't finish it. And sometimes that's how things in a live game can feel. And that's fair. If you redecorate your house and you're like, hey, I got to paint a wall. Okay, well, you got to tarp the floor, move the furniture out, do the painting, let it dry, do any texturing, whatever you want to do. There's a process to it. But if it's a live service game and people are living in this house, you're like, well, what if I move to the furniture to the left side of the room, tape part of the floor, I maybe paint half the wall. Okay, that one's done. Now we can shift everything to the other side. I can only do it at night when the people aren't in here because I've got to do the part by the door. That's kind of how they work on a live service game. So the morning the Pursuits went live, they talked to some of the folks on the UI team about the feature, and they had Reddit open. And this is literally how it went. He's like, hey, have you read it, Luke? He said, no, I haven't. And they said, please don't. They were crestfallen. Not just because some of the sometimes harsh feeling feedback, because this team wanted to make something sweet exceed your expectations and meet their own expectations, and none of that happened. So, on the positive note, we are getting a new Pursuits tab. On PC, you're going to be able to map it to a specific key, which is even better. But you're going to have quests on one side, so you have more text, and those are your trackable ones, like Revoker and the Chalice and stuff like that. And your basic bounties, they're going to be separate on the other side, and it looks like you've got two separate pages of tracking for each. I don't know the capacity of both. It's kind of hard to tell because the numbers don't add up, but generally it is going to be divvied up a little bit, and hopefully the process will be finished. And on PC, the fact that you can get to it better, I'm excited about that. Eververse. This is the next piece. Something everybody needs to try and wrap your head around is that Eververse is going to be one of those things that is not going anywhere, because now as Bungie is an independent studio, they have to find ways to make money where they see it viable. They're not going to have pay-to-win mechanics in the game, but if they make ornaments for certain things and you're willing to purchase them, it does help. There's a prime example. Whisper of the Worm's ornaments were successful enough that it paid, developer cost-wise, for the 0-hour mission and the rewards to be constructed. He says this stuff matters with different language, but you basically see that the ornaments that they put in the game allows them to build stuff in the future. Now, the nice thing about Eververse at this point, that I can honestly say, I've seen other people say it, Pyro yelled it loud and clear, and it's true. Most of all the money that you spend on this game at this point is going straight to Bungie. They're independent. The silver is going to them. And they're trying to be as fair as possible, and hopefully they walk a decent line. Now, I know some people are like, hey, why is the coolest armor always in Eververse? They're the glows that are in there. Honestly, some of those, again, you're going to have different armor sets. Some things are going to be cosmetic because it's how you want to look. Does it change how you play? Not at all. But do you want to look cool and pay for the fashion? You'll be able to earn certain things, hopefully. You know, there's raid armor and stuff like that that's going to be in there. But some of it is going to come from cosmetics. And things that are cosmetics that really don't change things. Shaders, ships, sparrows, emotes. You know, the type of finisher that you're going to have in the future. Those are going to be cosmetic. But hopefully players can still get cool things from activities that are worthwhile. Gameplay stuff, power mods, perk combinations, stats, triumphs, titles. That's all from gameplay, and that's not going to change. Now, one cool thing about Eververse with the ornaments and things, they have the universal ornaments coming to legendaries, and the sets are going to be possibly incomplete depending on what you've worked on. You've got, lots of seasons, lots of sets that have come through, Eververse, seasons, seasonal activities and otherwise. And if you say you have 3 of 5 of a set, well, if you want to complete that set and you already own part of it, they're going to discount the rest of it. Now, that may be just like standard practice for some, but it's nice that they're going to do that. So if you are missing something, you're not getting punished because you want to complete the set. It's just not going to cost you the full amount, which is nice. If you have 3 of 5 pieces, it's going to be discounted, 3/5. So you're going to take 3/5 off the top and you're going to pay the last 40% and you're good to go. So Eververse, honestly, with Armor 2.0 and Universal Ornaments, I'm really curious to see how that's going to work. But all in all, Eververse is going to be a cool thing that I think they tend to balance pretty well. They haven't broken the game with it yet. And it's actually going to be stuck on the director. So the director is going to be where you're going to find this. You don't even have to go visit Tess. So I'm not sure if she's out of a job, but it's a thing. We get into Season of Opulence. The Menagerie. They do like the Menagerie. But Escalation Protocol is one of those cool things that they've really enjoyed. And honestly, playing an Escalation Protocol with like a team of 7 to 9 people in there, out in an entire patrol zone with giant bosses and mechanics going on, that's still one of their favorites. Just matchmaking is difficult. Menagerie is 6 players. There's a no-fail state to it. And some of the boss fights are pretty cool. And they are decently happy with the way that activity was done. When it comes to rewarding, that's a different thing, and they don't really talk about that. But overall, just the mechanics of the encounter of Menagerie, they were happy with what happened there. And Escalation Protocol was the start of all of that, and they've kind of learned as they've gone through. Finally, we get down to Opulence and somehow more Season of the Drifter thoughts. They just get into things like the Chalice was a bigger version of targeted rewards. You had the Black Armory bounties, but unfortunately, the quest-specific attunement for specific forges is just crazy long. And now they do things like the Chalice being account-wide, and you can pick which Masterwork perk you want on it. There's a huge range between how those two work, and they've learned a lot as they go through. And the biggest thing is, they say not even the Chalice is perfect. Being held hostage by the rune that you want to drop from a strike or crucible to make a weapon or armor is kind of frustrating. Now, at this point, I've played enough things where I'm not really hurting for any runes. I have more runes than I can possibly ever spend. But generally, the idea of if you do want to go after something specific, waiting for runes to drop from who knows what, and it's still being somewhat RNG, there still could be a little more control over what you do, or shout out to Say No to Rage, intentionality. Just choice of what you're looking for. Couple things he didn't talk about were, there's a lot of stuff they've looked at. They haven't talked about it all. The Drifter Cinematic, Lumina, Tribute Hall, Vanguard Drifter, but he's not going to talk about things that they did well. He's trying to talk about things that he feel were not done well and that they've learned from, and he wants us to know as players that they've taken the feedback, they've taken their own play times that they've had in the game, and they're learning and they're trying to continue to develop this game that we love. So I've got 2 more of these going forward. If you guys enjoyed this type of style video of kind of a summation and thoughts and kind of a, short-ish version, it still ended up being about 20 minutes. There's going to be a couple more of these coming. We've also got the stream, but he's going to be talking about supers, PvP, armor, stats, mods, power sources, prime engrams, damage numbers, stacking, and more. So there's a lot more to come, obviously, as this is part 1. So if you guys did enjoy the video, drop a like below, but leave comments. Let me know your thoughts about any of this stuff. If you read through it before you get to this and you see the video, at least just let me know your comments down below. Do you like Gambit? Do you like Gambit Prime? Do you like Menagerie, Escalation Protocol? What do you think in the last 6 months they should be learning from? And what are you looking forward to in the fall? We've got more news coming in the next 2 days, so we're going to get a lot more information in the future. But for now, this is me. You know where to find me. It's Twitch and Twitter, Ebontis on both. But right here on YouTube, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do so. Definitely helps me out. It's a nice way to support the channel. And the alert bell will keep my videos coming to you. And if you do want to support the channel in another way, you can also go to my Patreon. Just look up Ebontis on Patreon. You'll find me there. And that's a way for you to directly support me. It's always appreciated and never required. But it helps. So it helps me be able to keep doing what I do. So thank you all very much. And I hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you guys in the next part. We've got many more of these to come.